The first thing I noticed was my workshop door wouldn't open. Not because it was stuck or warped from the rain we'd been having. Someone had changed the lock. I'm Ben Foster, 58 years old, and I've been turning a key in that same door for 15 years. Built that workshop myself when Sarah was still alive. She used to bring me coffee out there on Saturday mornings while I worked on projects. Now here I was, standing in my own driveway like some stranger, holding a key that didn't fit anymore. Tony's truck was in the garage. My garage. The space where I used to park before my daughter's boyfriend decided he needed it more than I did. Let me back up a bit so you understand how this started. My daughter Jen got divorced about 8 months ago. Her ex wasn't paying child support on time, and she needed a place to stay with the kids until she got back on her feet. Jason's 12, Kevin's 9. Good boys. I told her of course they could stay here. What kind of father would I be otherwise? Sarah passed 2 years ago. Heart attack. 1 minute she's laughing at something on TV, next minute she's gone. The house has felt too big ever since. Having family around seemed like it might help fill some of that empty space. Jen moved in with just a few suitcases and the boys' school stuff. Said it would only be temporary, maybe 3 months, 4 at most. She's been teaching at Riverside Elementary for 6 years, makes decent money, just needed time to find an apartment she could afford on her own. That was the plan anyway. Tony showed up in week 2, met him online, she said. Construction worker between jobs, nice enough guy, I figured. Helped me move some boxes around, knew his way around tools. Problem was, he never left. First it was just staying over on weekends, then it was most nights. Then one day I come home from the hardware store, and there's his clothes in my washing machine, and his razor on my bathroom counter. I didn't say anything right away. Jen seemed happier than she'd been in months. The boys liked him. He'd throw a football with them in the backyard, help Kevin with his math homework. I told myself it was fine. House was big enough. But Tony had this way of making himself comfortable. Real comfortable, started small. He'd use my coffee maker in the morning and not clean it. Leave his work boots by the front door where I'd trip over them. Use my laptop without asking to check job listings. Then he began rearranging things. My tools in the garage got moved around so he could organize them better. My recliner in the living room got pushed to a corner so his gaming chair could face the TV. Said the old furniture didn't match anyway. The first time I really felt something shift was when I went to get my sockets set one Saturday morning. I keep my tools organized a certain way. Everything in its place. Spent 30 years as an electrician learning that the right tool in the wrong place might as well not exist. Couldn't find my 10mm socket anywhere. Finally found it mixed in with Tony's tools in a random drawer he'd claimed. When I asked about it, he shrugged and said he must have borrowed it and forgot to put it back. I was fixing Jen's car. Figured you wouldn't mind. Thing is, he didn't ask. Just took what he needed and figured I'd be okay with it later. That became a pattern real quick. About month 3, I found out he'd been using my workshop. Not just using it. He'd moved his sawhorses in there, set up a workbench, hung his own tools on my pegboard. When I asked about it, he said Jen told him it was okay. When I asked Jen, she said she thought I wouldn't mind sharing. Sharing, that's what she called it. I minded. I minded a lot, but how do you tell your daughter that her boyfriend can't use a room in a house where she's staying for free? Especially when she's been through hell with the divorce and trying to raise 2 boys on her own. So I kept my mouth shut and watched him turn my space into his space. One power tool at a time. The workshop had been my sanctuary since Sarah died. Place where I could work with my hands and think about her without getting all emotional in front of the grandkids. I'd refinish the kitchen table she loved. Fix the porch swing where we used to sit evenings. All that work happened in that room. Now Tony had his music playing in there, his projects spread across my workbench, his business cards sitting next to my tool calendar. Made the whole space feel different, like it wasn't mine anymore. The real problems started when Tony decided he was going to make some money doing handyman jobs on the side. Nothing wrong with that, except he was supposed to be looking for full-time work and collecting unemployment benefits. Hard to do both without somebody noticing. He'd have clients come by to pick up furniture he'd repaired or cabinets he'd built, using my electricity, my workspace, my tools. When I mentioned maybe he should chip in for the power bill since he was running my table saw and drill press all day, he laughed it off. Said he was practically family now. That's when I started paying closer attention. Tony wasn't just using my tools, he was selling them. Started with things I hadn't touched in years. An old router, some chisels that belonged to my dad. Told Jen he was helping me declutter, And she believed him. Then I came home one Thursday and my meter saw was gone. The good one I bought myself for my 50th birthday. When I asked where it went, Tony said it wasn't getting much use anyway, and some guy offered good money for it. Had the nerve to hand me $200 like that made it okay. That saw cost me 800 new. I started keeping track after that. Made a list of what was missing, what was moved, what was broken. Found out Tony had been telling people he owned a handyman business and giving out my address as his shop location. Had business cards made up with his name and my phone number. Walking into my own workshop became like stepping into someone else's world. My pegboard, where I'd organized every wrench and screwdriver according to size and function, now had Tony's tools mixed in randomly. My workbench that I'd kept clean and level had his half-finished projects scattered across it. Wood shavings from his jobs covering the floor I swept after every use. The smell was different too. My workshop always smelled like sawdust and the light machine oil I used on my tools. Now it reeked of the cheap cologne Tony wore and the energy drinks he left everywhere. Even found cigarette butts in my coffee can I used for screws. I'd built that workbench with Sarah watching back when we first moved in. She handed me bolts and held boards steady while I measured twice and cut once. Took me 3 weekends to get it exactly right. Now Tony had moved it 6 inches to make room for his table saw. My measurements were off, everything felt wrong. That's when the real violations started happening. Tony began bringing clients to my house without asking. I'd come home from grocery shopping to find strangers in my driveway looking at furniture Tony had built, using my driveway as his showroom. One afternoon I walked into my own kitchen and there were 3 people I'd never seen before sitting at my table while Tony showed them cabinet samples, like my house was his office. When I asked what was going on, Tony introduced me as his business partner's father. Business partner. I never agreed to be anyone's business partner. Started finding receipts for lumber and supplies with my address on them. Tony was having materials delivered to my house for his jobs. Big stuff too. Sheets of plywood, bags of concrete, boxes of tile. My neighbors were probably wondering what kind of construction project I had going on. When I asked Tony about it, he said it was easier than trying to coordinate deliveries to job sites. Made sense from a business standpoint, he claimed, but nobody asked if it made sense to me. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning. I got up early, like always, went to make coffee, and found a notice from the electric company on my kitchen table, not addressed to me. Addressed to Tony Coleman at my address. He'd somehow gotten the utility account switched to his name. When I called the company, they said Mr. Coleman had provided identification showing this as his primary residence and requested the transfer for business purposes. The rep was real helpful. Told me if I wanted to dispute it, I'd need to prove I lived there. Prove I lived in my own house, the house I've been paying taxes on for 15 years. That's when I realized this wasn't just some guy taking advantage of my good nature. This was someone actively trying to take over my life. I spent that whole morning sitting in my kitchen, staring at that utility notice. Thinking about how this had all happened so gradually, I barely noticed each step. Like watching someone slowly turn down the heat until you realize you're freezing. Tony was at work that day, real work, not the unemployment office kind. Turned out he'd been doing cash jobs all along while collecting benefits. Had a whole network of clients who paid under the table, using my workshop as his base of operations. I walked out to the workshop and really looked at what had happened to my space. My father's old hand planes pushed into a corner to make room for Tony's power tools. The pegboard I'd carefully organized now chaos. Projects I'd been working on before Sarah died buried under Tony's lumber. Found something else too. A folder tucked behind my toolbox with copies of utility bills, bank statements, even a credit application. All with Tony's name but my address. Guy was building a paper trail to establish residency. That afternoon I called my neighbor Nick. Nick Hayes, retired bank manager, knows about legal stuff. We sat at my kitchen table while Tony was out job hunting and Nick explained what was happening. He's establishing residency, Nick said, getting his name on utilities, using the address for business. Pretty soon he'll have more claim to this place than you might think. Nick had seen this before. People who move in as guests then gradually establish legal rights through documentation. Get their name on enough official papers and suddenly they're not guests anymore. You need to act fast, Nick told me. Longer this goes on, harder it gets to remove him. Nick gave me the number for Catherine Bell, a lawyer who handles property disputes. Said she'd helped his nephew when his ex-girlfriend tried the same trick. Had a meeting with her the next day while Tony was using my workshop to build cabinets for some client. Kate looked over my situation and wasn't surprised. Told me she sees this more often than people think. Someone moves in as a guest, starts acting like a tenant, then claims rights they never had. Good news is, he's making mistakes, she said. Bad news is the longer you wait, the harder this gets. That's when I started building my case. I began documenting everything. Took photos of my tools with their serial numbers before Tony could sell more of them. Made copies of my property deed, utility bills, insurance papers. Started recording conversations on my phone when Tony would talk about his workshop or his business location. First thing I did was photograph every tool in that workshop. Took me 3 hours, but I cataloged everything. Model numbers, serial numbers where I could find them, condition reports, had receipts for most of the expensive stuff going back years. Sarah always made me keep receipts. Said you never know when you might need to prove what you own. Smart woman, smarter than I gave her credit for at the time. Found out Tony was advertising handyman services on Facebook using photos of work he'd done in my shop. One post showed him standing next to a bookshelf he'd built, caption reading, "Another satisfied customer. Message me for your custom woodworking needs." Picture was taken in my workshop. You could see my tool calendar on the wall behind him. Another post showed him refinishing a dining table on my workbench. Professional furniture restoration at competitive prices, the caption said. Listed my phone number as the contact. That explained why I'd been getting random calls asking about furniture repair. The unemployment fraud was easy to prove once I started looking. Tony was getting benefits for being unable to find suitable work while posting about his thriving handyman business. Had screenshots of him advertising services, photos of completed projects, even customer reviews mentioning his professional workshop. He was collecting $340 a week in unemployment while pulling in cash for side jobs. State of Ohio doesn't take kindly to that kind of double dipping. I made copies of everything and organized it like the electrical diagrams I used to draft for commercial buildings. Every wire had to connect properly or the whole system would fail. Evidence worked the same way. Had to show clear connections between the fraudulent claims and the actual business activity. What really got to me was finding the notebook Tony kept hidden behind my toolbox. Guy was meticulous about tracking his cash income. Listed every job, every payment, every expense he could write off. Running his business like a professional while telling the state he couldn't find work. Page after page of entries. Kitchen cabinet install -$800. Deck repair -$450. Bathroom vanity $320. All dated during periods when he was claiming unemployment benefits for being unable to find suitable employment. The notebook also had my address listed as his business headquarters, my phone number as his primary contact. Even had notes about which of my tools worked best for different jobs, like he'd written a manual for operating my workshop. But the thing that really burned me was a page near the back where he'd calculated how much money he was saving by using my space. Electricity, shop rent, tool depreciation. According to his math, operating out of my workshop was saving him about $400 a month in business expenses. He'd put a dollar value on stealing my life. I took that notebook to Kate the next day. She looked through it and whistled low. "This is better than anything I could have hoped for," she said. "He's basically confessed to everything in writing." Kate explained that Tony had committed multiple violations. Unemployment fraud for claiming benefits while working. Theft for selling my tools without permission. Trespassing for using my property as a business location without consent. And potentially tax fraud if he wasn't reporting the cash income. "Question is, how far do you want to take this?" she asked. I thought about that drive home. Thought about Sarah and how she'd handle this situation. She was always better at standing up to people than I was. Never let anyone push her around, especially in her own home. She'd have put a stop to this months ago. Probably would have confronted Tony the first time he rearranged her kitchen. But she also would have been smart about it. Sarah believed in doing things the right way, even when the right way was harder. I decided to go all the way. First step was getting my utilities back in my name. Kate helped me file a dispute with documentation proving continuous residence and ownership. Had my property deed, 15 years of utility bills, homeowners' insurance records, Tony's business purpose claim fell apart when the company realized he wasn't actually a legal business entity. Took 2 weeks, but I got my account back. Tony wasn't happy about that. Came storming into the house, waving the notice like I'd done something wrong. "What's this about?" he demanded, holding up the utility transfer reversal. "It's about those being my utilities in my house," I said. "I was just trying to help organize things, make the business more professional." "What business? You're unemployed, remember?" He stared at me for a long minute. Think that's when he realized I knew more than I'd been letting on. Step 2 was reporting the unemployment fraud. State of Ohio has an online tip form, pretty straightforward. You upload your evidence, provide contact information, wait for them to investigate. I uploaded everything. Screenshots of his Facebook business page, photos of work he'd done in my shop, copies of customer reviews mentioning his services, even included pages from his notebook showing his actual income. Got a call from an investigator 3 days later. Woman named Sandra, who sounded like she'd seen this kind of fraud before. "Mr. Foster, we appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Based on the evidence you've provided, we'll be conducting a full audit of Mr. Coleman's benefit claims." She explained they'd be reviewing his entire claim history, cross-referencing with the business activity I'd documented. If they found evidence of deliberate fraud, he'd have to repay all benefits received plus penalties, could also face criminal charges depending on the dollar amount. Meanwhile, I was building the theft case, cataloged every tool that had gone missing, researched their replacement values, found serial numbers where possible. That mitre saw alone was worth more than the 200 he'd given me. Add in the router, the chisels, a cordless drill that had disappeared, and we were looking at over $1,200 in stolen property. In Ohio, theft over $1,000 is a felony. But I wanted to handle this right. Didn't want to blow up Jen's life or traumatize the boys. So I talked to her first. "Jen, we need to discuss Tony. Dad, I know he's been using your workshop, but he's really trying to get back on his feet. Honey, he changed my door locks, put the utilities in his name. He's been selling my tools and claiming this is his business address. Showed her everything I'd documented, the utility transfer, the Facebook posts, the list of missing tools. Her face went white when she saw how much he'd sold. I had no idea, she said. He told me you said he could use whatever he needed. I never said that. She looked through the photos again, seeing her boyfriend's deception laid out in black and white. Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought he was just being helpful. What's he told you about his job situation, that he's interviewing but nothing's panned out yet? Showed her the Facebook business page, Tony Coleman Handyman Services. 47 customer reviews, operating out of my address since before he'd even moved in. He's been lying to both of us, I said. Jen started crying then. Not the angry kind of crying, the defeated kind. Like she was realizing she'd picked another loser after thinking she'd finally found someone decent. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want him gone today. You and the boys can stay as long as you need, but Tony leaves now, she nodded. I'll tell him. But when Tony got home that evening, he didn't take the news well. She's kicking me out because of some tools. He said to Jen, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. It's not about tools, Tony. You changed the locks. You put your name on bills. You've been lying about the unemployment thing. I was trying to build something here. Thought we were building something together by stealing from my father. I wasn't stealing. I was organizing, making the space functional. That's when I walked into the room. Tony, you need to pack your things tonight. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, Ben. Come on. We can work this out. I'll pay you back for whatever you think I owe. It's not about money. It's about respect. This is my house. Those were my tools. That was my workshop, and you treated all of it like it was yours to take. I was helping Jen, helping the family. You were helping yourself? To my tools, my space, my address, my utilities. Even my unemployment benefits you were collecting while working in my shop? Tony's face changed then. Realized I knew about more than just the missing tools. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. So does the state unemployment office. And the police, once I file the theft report tomorrow. Tony got that look then. The look guys get when they're not used to being told no by someone they've been pushing around. Fine, but I'm taking my tools. Your tools weren't in my workshop to begin with. The ones you brought fit in one toolbox. Everything else stays. He started to argue, but Jen stepped between us. Just go, Tony. Please. He packed his clothes and left that night. Didn't say goodbye to the boys, which told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man he really was. 3 days later, the state unemployment office called him in for a benefits review. Week after that, police showed up with a warrant for theft charges. Turns out some of the tools he'd sold belonged to other people too. Guy had been running the same scam at his last girlfriend's place. I got my workshop back. Changed all the locks myself this time, put my tools back where they belonged on the pegboard Sarah and I had installed together, swept up his sawdust and cleaned the workbench until it smelled like machine oil and possibility again. Jen found an apartment she could afford about a month later. Nice place. Safe neighborhood, good schools for the boys. She apologized probably 50 times before she moved out. I should have seen what he was doing, she said. He was good at hiding it. That's what con men do. How did you know what to do? I thought about that. Your mom always said trust but verify. I trusted too long before I verified. The boys come visit every other weekend now. Jason asked if he could help me build something in the workshop. We're making a birdhouse for his new apartment balcony. Kevin wants to learn how to use the hand tools. It's good having them around, but it's also good having my space back. My house feels like mine again, like the place Sarah and I built together. Sometimes I sit in my workshop in the evenings, just listening to the quiet, no sound of someone else's projects running, no strangers coming to pick up furniture. Just me and my tools and the smell of sawdust. That means home. I keep Sarah's coffee mug on the workbench. She'd have handled Tony faster than I did, but she'd be proud that I handled him right. The house is quiet now, but it's the good kind of quiet. The kind that means everything's where it belongs, including me. Tony never paid back the unemployment money. Court ordered it, but he moved to Florida and disappeared. Sometimes guys like that just move on to the next mark when one situation gets too hot. I hope whoever he's with now figures him out faster than we did. I learned something important through all this. Sometimes being patient isn't the same thing as being kind. Sometimes letting someone walk all over you doesn't help anybody, especially them. Setting boundaries isn't mean, it's necessary. Look, if you're reading this and something similar is happening to you, don't wait as long as I did. Document everything. Take photos. Keep receipts. Get legal advice early. The longer you let someone establish themselves in your space, the harder it gets to remove them. Trust me on that. Your home is your sanctuary. Don't let anyone take that away from you, no matter how much they claim to need help. There's a difference between helping family and letting family help themselves to everything you own. Learn to spot the difference before it costs you more than a few tools.